Good morning, Vietnam. Sorry, Finland, or the rest of the world. I'm back from my trip to Vietnam, and now it's time to do a little bit of review time. And as you can see from my great tan, it's not that white as the paper here. So, Finland has lots of snow and ice at the moment, back from the all so nice country. So today's review is a book review, which I was actually reading on my vacation, hence the mention to my trip and all that stuff. Well, none of that is interesting, at least when it comes to comparison to this book I'm reviewing today. This is called Isten fanzine, and the issue is called Churches. So that is exactly what we have here. And those of you who are familiar with Isten all the way to back in the early 90s and stuff, you know that this one is the real deal. Black metal, underground, death metal, all that stuff related to metal in one way or another. And lots of sarcasm, humor, unapologetic ways to approach the scene, the bands, the artists, everything within and so forth. So Isten is now back. But what it has to offer in 2018. Now, this was already released about 5 weeks ago, prior to this video, in the end of January. And this is released by Swart Publishing, I guess, the kind of a side project of Swart Records, which is already familiar to many of you, with its release to underground metal or weird indie recordings, be it jazz, rock, whatever. But that is now what is we have hands in here is 100 pages, full of sketches, very nice, made interviews, interwoven, what it else, you know, the stuff that is going all the way from the Tampere regions with the photos and whatnot. And this is kind of a one-of-a-kind stuff here. Now, Swart Records, Swart Publishing actually released an 800-page compilation about 3 years earlier than this, which kind of put inside one pack of covers those 800 pages of Isten history. So kind of taking this chronological stuff, and now it's done here. But despite of that, the info sheet here says that it has been like 6 years of silence between this one and the previous Isten releases. So there's a little bit of discussion whether there's actually 6 years or 3 years of silence, but point aside, today we focus on this one. Now, this one is a really interesting piece of a interview book when it comes to metal and whatnot, because this is not the way of the typical fanzine or website or whatever when it comes to the interviews. It's not like one band, you get the 2 or 3 or 4 pages and a picture to go with it, and the next band and the next band, and you know the drill. There are no reviews here when it comes to albums, demos or whatever. This is just pure interview work here, with some editorial lines between the interviews and the comments of the interviews. And so it's a really nice way to actually compile stuff from, you know, the underground, which is then again made into a book filled with this kind of stuff here. Now this starts interesting with a couple of black metal underground names, Mikko Aspa from Clandestine, Blaze Northern Heritage and whatever, and then going on with Ville Pirinen from Ceremonia, and then Werewolf of Satanic Warmaster and so forth. So it's a kind of a strong black metal start, but this is not a black metal fanzine as such, because what we have here is speed metal, heavy metal, thrash metal, punk, of course black metal, all kinds of stuff. We have Matt McNerney from Grave Pleasures and Hex Vessel. Grave Pleasures is out now with the new album and all that stuff. So we have kind of a rock and roll as well. And then there's ARG, you know, the old Finnish thrash speed metal band. And Vorum is presented by Jonathan Johansson from Åland, Finland. So there's kind of a death metal as well. And last but not least, Kimmo Kuusniemi from Sarcophagus, which is one of the oldest heavy metal bands in Finland from all the way 1970s. But these are all kind of twining together in the sense of having this discussion going on throughout the book. And here's kind of the thank you and editorial list and the whole artist list, which are now interviewed in this book. Now, I said like these interviews start with kind of topics and photos and the kind of first lines of editorial text. It goes further with these kind of a nice black and white sketches here. And you see Mikko Aspa from Northern Heritage and Clandestine Blaze. And then it goes onward, with the more photos, more sketches, and all that stuff. But like I said, these interviews are not like one band at a time and blah blah blah. But it's like we start with Mikko Aspa, then we go with Ville Pirinen, Werewolf, we go another band, and then we go back and forth between these artists. So it kind of becomes like a kind of a sort of narrative in the sense of one artist, then the second artist comes in, the first one leaves, the second one leaves, then we bring more and more stuff. And while I say we, I actually mean the makers of this book. But as a reader, it feels like, okay, we're going someplace and then another and stuff like that. And this is, basically divided into chapters here. But they hardly mean anything. They're kind of like bookmarks of, like, okay, I'm finished with chapter 4, so I'm just gonna put the book around for chapter 5 beginning. But it's like a continuous dialogue going back and forth. The artists jump in, they jump out, and the stuff goes on. And the editorial work is quite clever, as with always with Isten, but maybe not so much humor as some of you might actually know. There are, however, kind of like these really nice pieces, kind of what we have here. These are kind of some like small remarks here and there, which kind of create this kind of a feeling what we have within the within the pages of this book. And we have like these big quotes with these hand-drawn images. Then we have these kind of a compilation of photos which are about Tampere region where Isten is physically located. We have also these kind of sketches of the buildings in Tampere. So this is kind of like Tampere edition, which is already shown by the tower here, Näsineula, and as well as on the background where it kind of says like bye, and the Näsineula is going crumbles. So this is a very peculiar, like I said, one of a kind release. It's an interesting book to go through the artist's mind, their vision, how they do what they do, be it music, be it lyrics, be it ideology, be it from the left, be it from the right, be it in the middle, be it from out of nowhere. And that is what this makes so interesting. It's not this kind of a typical like, what is your way of, how to select your amps when you're doing guitars? Was it hard in the studio? Did you have a hard time, balancing between booze and creating songs and all that stuff? This kind of goes deeper. But then again, it's only bits and pieces at a time. There might be 2 questions to Mikko Aspa, and suddenly we're at a different phase. Then there's Kimmo Kuusniemi saying this and that about his history with the band and blah blah blah, and it goes back and forth, and it feels like this is kind of a group discussion, being the Isten guy in the middle and the rest of the guys around, except that these other guys don't have the dialogue with themselves. It's like they're with headphones on and the Isten guys asking questions to back and forth like, what do you think of this? So how do you reply to this? And all that stuff. But it's nicely, created as a full narrative, which is filling these 100 or something pages here. And I don't know, this kind of begins out of nowhere and ends out of nowhere. There's no like a beginning and the end as such. There's not like a defining question and then all be and all kind of an answer that is kind of a, and this is kind of like a, this could be a movie about artists and rock stars or whatever, and it could be seen as a like a as a glimpse to the artist's world. Like, what do you think of that? How do you feel that this fits here or doesn't fit there, and blah blah blah. But that is, however, what this makes so interesting, so fascinating, because, like I said, it's not a typical book. It's not a typical bunch of interviews. There are no reviews. There are no page-long monologues, much like my videos are, saying how things should be or how they are not, or how they shouldn't be. But it's kind of like you give the voice to the, people doing the music, replying to the very questions. But still, the editorial work is clever. It's bits and pieces here and there, kind of like making everything stick together. It's kind of like those seamless seams which actually glue the stuff together. So eventually, this is kind of like hard, or let's say impossible to label by genres. This is not a black metal book, it's not a death metal book, it's not a metal book actually. But then again, it has a lot of metallic ingredients. But it's as much a personality, kind of like characteristic way of, talking to the artists within the bands and what they do. So it's kind of like a story, but then again, it's not. It's about, interviewing these artists, but it's just not like that. So, like Isten and Swart put it out there, this is unapologetic way to approach music and the artists and all that stuff. And it's kind of like you get it or you don't. There is no maybes. There's no like, I kind of would like to have that book, but I don't because, well, then don't. This is the stuff for fanatics. This is stuff for the people who want to know what lies behind all that stuff. What lies when you dig a little bit deeper. This is not that book that gives you all the answer, but it gives you definitely some nice thought. And one of the kind of interesting thing is what actually Matt McNerney kind of flips totally around, is that maybe it's not about hate, maybe it's about love. I'm not gonna reply to you in that sense because it's not like I'm the great philosopher here, but I think there's very much wisdom in this book, given it's still kind of a short or thin for a big book, but it clearly has some nice different way of thinking what is your usual metal magazine or website or, I don't know, YouTube channel. So if your urge is to dig a little bit deeper into the underground of metal or see the other side of the metal, I strongly suggest to you check out Isten fanzine Churches. Then again, this is not for everybody. It's definitely one of those mainstream releases, like if you want to have this great Sabaton or Volbeat or let's say Megadeth poster on your wall, and if you want to get some nice photos of guys looking good with their makeup and hair and all that stuff, don't get it. It's not your stuff. But for others, maniacs, diehards, or weird people like us, get it. Isten is your choice, and I guess you won't be disappointed, or at least you will be a little bit of surprised what it has to offer. Anyway, this is my opinion, so thank you for watching this review video, and as always, subscribe to the channel for more stuff to come, be it reviews, interviews, and whatnot, and see you soon. Bye.